In those days, the deputy job was a lot different. But I'll tell you now, the attorney general job is a lot different also. You like records. This must be a record of attorney general being proposed for contempt within 100 days of taking office.
Just a little.
I think that's funny.
Funny,
Yeah,
hysterical, a little humor.
Talk about contempt.
Contempt humor.
Contemptible. Yeah.
This is a whole new low. Joining us now.
Hey, and here's my punchline. Hey, are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, I committed perjury. I lied to Congress. Yeah, exactly. No, I don't really get that, but I don't get Barr.
I don't get Barr.
Really, more than that, I don't get Republicans that are circling the wagons for an attorney general that's breaking the law.
Right in front of your face.
Committing
you saw
perjury, that's in contempt of Congress. And he thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
Well,
and
you know what?
won't say anything.
That's really less on him than it is on you.
Joining us now, member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and Democratic candidate for president, Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. These are times like we've never seen before. Just looking at the attorney general there joking about being held in contempt.
Well, exactly. And you think about when he said that the job is different. No, he's different.
Yeah.
He's the one that's different in how he's handling this job. Because I think it was Thomas Paine who once said, the king isn't the law in America, the law is king, right? And he has shown a complete disrespect for the law in terms of not showing up at the House, in terms of how he answered our questions. My favorite one was, I asked him if Mueller had reviewed the tax returns and the financial documents for the president. And he said, well, I don't know. I said, you don't know? You're the attorney general. And he said, well, go and ask Bob Mueller when he comes here. And he's not here.
Yeah, and now they're not letting him there. So let's talk about constitutional questions. Nancy Pelosi talked about a constitutional crisis that she said she believes that we're in, and other Democrats believe we're in a constitutional crisis. The executive branch is showing contempt. I think both legally and just as a matter of fact towards the legislative branch. How does the legislative branch, how do the judiciary committees in the House and the Senate, how does the oversight committee in the House get the White House to let you all do what the Constitution provides you're supposed to do?
Well, we have to hold them accountable, and it will end up in court. As been pointed out, they are the ones that are pushing us to this constitutional crisis. We have equal branches of government. We have the right to issue these subpoenas, and when they don't show up for these subpoenas, then they're violating the law.
And you can take them to court. They can be held in contempt. But, you know, it was 5 years before Eric Holder and the Obama administration had to respond. How does this get expedited so Congress can move more quickly and get the information that Americans need? Because 5 years from now, that does us no good.
Well, when you look at it, Democrats control the House, and there's a lot of things you can do with contempt proceedings. You can fine people if they don't show up. The House has control, the power of the purse over this administration. So they do have some control. And then we have the power of the people. The people showed in the last election that they wanted to have a check and balance on this president, that they didn't want him doing unlawful things, that they want someone in the White House that can tell the truth and can obey the law. So I think there are a lot of things that we have and levers we can push to get them to obey the law. But the bottom line is this isn't a joke. This is about our Constitution and our democracy.
So, Senator, a couple of days ago, the Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said of the Mueller report, case closed. This is over. This Russia question is over. Let's move on. Let's talk about real issues. The Attorney General has said, I gave you 90-some% of it. I had to redact some of it for reasons that you would understand as well. How are you viewing the outcome of the Mueller report? Do you believe there's more to know about it, or do you accept the top-line conclusion of Volume 1 that even Bob Mueller himself said there was no conspiracy between the campaign and the Russian government?
Well, this is why we need to hear from Bob Mueller. A foreign government invaded our election. They didn't use tanks or missiles, but they used computers. And they they literally tried to change the result of our election. They literally hacked into one candidate's campaign. And that's why we need to know. It's about 2020. It was Marco Rubio who said 1 year, they did it to one candidate, one campaign, and the next time it's going to be another. And people know that we're supposed to have the say in our democracy, not a foreign government. That's why this is way beyond what's going on, the fights in Congress about subpoenas. This is also about why can't we protect our election with backup paper ballots? You know Florida, Joe. You know what happened there. Or why can't we have audits of our election so that we can make sure that our elections are right?
Agree on that. Republicans would say, though, you've already heard from Bob Mueller. He just gave you 2 years and all that money and all those resources and gave you a 448-page report. That is hearing from Bob Mueller.
But the report is what showed us the depth of what happened, that they actually tried to hack into every state's election equipment, that they actually went in with propaganda and they hacked into a candidate's basic equipment and got all the emails out of their campaign chair. They're going to try to do it again. And that's why what I have to ask Mitch McConnell, and the country should be asking him, is why is he stopping these bipartisan measures from going forward?
So the ultimate check and balance on this may in fact end up being the 2020 election and whether people decide to vote Donald Trump.
Thank you for bringing it back to that.
Whether people decide to vote him out of office. You're running. The fact that at the moment the three top candidates on both sides, Republican and Democrat, are three white guys in their 70s, and yet there are 4 women running on the Democratic side. What are you hearing from voters when you're out in your town hall meetings? What are you hearing from them about that, about whether women are breaking through in the way they would like them to?
Well, first of all, I know when you look in places like New Hampshire and Iowa, the 3 women are usually in the top 8 candidates, 3 of us. We may not be at the top, but that's pretty significant when you look at the entire field of 20-some people. I also think that this is just the beginning. A peanut farmer from Georgia at this point had something like 1%. People have to get to know candidates. I'm from a state that's not that big. I know I have to get out there and introduce myself and talk about how I think if you're going to run for president, then you have to have real solutions for real problems, and you have to show how you're going to pay for them. So I'm out there talking about that. We have an operation that's growing and growing, and the fact that the guys are up front, well, the guys were better known from the beginning, and I always say, may the best woman win.
So you've got a plan to combat addiction and mental health, and you're making it a primary focus. Tell us why, what it is.
As we've just seen from some numbers out of Iowa, the number one thing people are asking about is not Russia, it is not the Mueller report, it is health care, and it is the environment. For me, health care is about everything from bringing premiums down to paying for pharmaceuticals. But this mental health addiction issue is personal. My dad, when I was growing up, had 2 DWIs when I was in middle school. When in the 90s he got a 3rd one, and at that point the choice was jail or treatment. And he picked treatment with the help of our family, and in his words, he was pursued by grace. And that meant his faith, and that meant the treatment he got, and his life changed. And now he's 91, and he's in assisted living, and he told me a few months ago, it's hard to get a drink around here anyway, but his AA group is still visiting him.
Right,
and I believe everyone has this right to be pursued by grace. And when you look at what's happened in this country, with mental health especially, we went from these state mental health hospitals that had issues to community-based, but the money didn't follow, the beds didn't follow. And we have a major shortage for people with mental illnesses, severe mental illnesses, but also just people that need everyday treatment. 30% increase in suicides. You brought up veterans the last time I was on, Joe. We have seen the veterans' suicide rate now is 3 times the average for other people in this country. We have a major problem going on here with suicide, and the way you get at it is counselors that are in the schools. You get at it with people that people can go to repeatedly. People say to me, I just don't know where to go. And as far as how we pay for it, I think about this little girl in Minnesota, high school girl named Casey Joe, champion swimmer, got addicted to opioids when she was sick and then turned to illegal drugs. And right before she died, she said to her mom, Mama, this isn't my fault. And it's not her fault. It is the fault of the companies that got people hooked. They should be paying not just for opioids, but for addiction we're seeing with meth, crack cocaine, hitting communities of color, as well as mental health. $100 billion we can bring coming in divided between 2-cent tax on the opioids, milligram, and then you also have got the master settlement, just like tobacco, that's going to come through.
And you have to give people that hope, that they can get beyond it, and sometimes it seems. But your father's talk about pursued by grace. That's an extraordinary story.
Great story.
You know, I was talking to my kids earlier this week. And they were talking about Robert Downey Jr., which the guy is solely responsible, mostly responsible for creating a formula that created the most successful movie franchise in history. I had to remind my kids, I said, you know, there was a time that he was such a joke because of, you know, his addiction, and you know that Hollywood was just like considered him a joke, and he was burned out, and he was on drugs, and he was an alcoholic, and all of these things. And it is, I mean, it's amazing how he's turned his life around, and how that does happen. There is hope all over the country with Amy's father and so many other people, but they need the support. They need the help.
As the senator knows and points out all the time, it cuts across race and class. It doesn't matter who you are. Mental illness and addiction can hit you as well. I want to ask you about the state of Minnesota, which went for Hillary Clinton, but just by a whisker. I think it was like 45,000 votes or something. Almost went for Donald Trump in 2016. What are you hearing from people who may have voted for Barack Obama and then voted from Donald Trump about what's going on in the country over the last couple of years?
So the country, the economy is stable. That means something to them. But it is hard for them to share in that prosperity if they can't afford their prescription drugs, if they can't afford health care. They voted for this president because they thought, well, we need some change now, and he's going to have our back. And what they've seen, specifically in the rural areas, specifically because of this tariff war, they have seen mounting problems with selling their goods, bringing things to market. What are we at now? The trade deficit is at $891 billion, the biggest that we've seen in history. And so while I hope he gets back to that negotiating table and we get something done, they are starting to see the effects of that. And you're specifically talking about people in rural parts of my state that voted, by the way, for him and voted for me, right?
Right.
They are people that may not agree with everything you say, but they want to make sure you've got their back. And right now they are questioning that with Donald Trump in a big, big way.
Do they blame him for their economic trouble? As you point out, as of about 8 hours ago, the tariffs on China went up to 25% from 10%. Are they blaming Donald Trump for their troubles?
They do not like chaos. They're people that go to work every day, so they do blame him for chaos. They don't like the divides that he creates every single day. And it's going to be my job, if I get the honor to head up this ticket, my job is to do what I've done my whole life, and that is bring them together and say, look, this is how we're going to get to a better place for you and our economy.
Can
So,
go ahead. The second question on the Iowa, the Des Moines Register poll was about climate change and environment. Noticeably a big difference, even from the last election when it was barely raised in the debate formats. How much are people asking you about it when you're out on the campaign trail? What specifics are you giving them in terms of your policy? And has the whole, in a way, the fuss about whether you support the Green New Deal or don't support the Green New Deal, has that kind of muddied the waters because there are a whole load of other proposals out there that people should be focused on?
No, what they're focused on is the fact that farms are flooding in Iowa and in Missouri like we've never seen before. A woman, lost her house, submerged. She's holding binoculars and told me that house stood there for 100 years, had horse plaster in the walls, and now it's flooded from a river that's 2.5 miles away. Or the firefighters lost in Arizona, or the wildfires, or the tornadoes that we are seeing in places that we didn't expect to see them, and hail. So in the middle of the country now, you're seeing these weather effects where they know that climate change isn't happening in 100 years. It's happening right now. That is why you're seeing it show up in places like Iowa. It is realistic. The world that they're seeing around them is crumbling. And so that's why getting us back into the International Climate Change Agreement, bringing back the clean power rules, doing something on gas mileage standards. Florida is #1 when it comes to this, when you look at the metropolitan areas that are going to flood, but you see it all over our nation. So I think that the voters are seeing what the White House is trying to ignore, and that is that this is a major concern for them, for their kids and their grandkids.
It's very interesting you talk about the floods in the middle of the country and the disasters worldwide. I was golfing a couple of years ago. I golf once every 5 years, and this time I golfed.
Yes.
I was lucky enough to golf with a guy who's a very conservative Republican. He's probably never voted for a Democrat in his life. And one of the 4 people golfing said something about climate change and started to joke. He said, I work for an insurance firm, and I'm a risk management guy. Let me tell you something. You look at the natural disasters over the past decade, and you would have to be a fool not to understand the scale of climate change. He said, I will still vote Republican, but they've got to get right on climate change.
Well, home insurance
that's
rates
a
up
guy,
50%.
Yeah,
in
that's
just
a
the last
guy
few years.
whose job depends on
Right.
figuring it out. And the bottom line, it's not just science. His bottom line for his insurance company tells him climate change is not only real, it's getting worse by the year.
And people see it in their home insurance rates, which is this argument you just made, that needs to get out there. That's why I think the other reason people are seeing it, 50% increase in their home insurance rates in just the last few years. That's not just in Florida, that's across the nation.
Hey, so Willie and I were talking to you as you were coming on. We were so glad that you did a Fox News debate. And we're so glad because, we're glad you're here. But, preaching to the choir all the time. I'm not saying we have a lot of different people watching the show, but, it seems like Democrats have been uncomfortable going out and talking to people who may not agree with them 100% of the time. There was this awesome Bill Maher monologue several months ago talking about the need. And I love that somebody from Minnesota went on Fox News and took your message to viewers who can be persuaded. And,
right.
Those of us in our little bubble who go, oh, no, conservatives, up for conservatives and liberals. They please explain to me how you vote for Barack Obama in 2008 and Donald Trump in 2016. There are persuadables that watch Fox News.
Exactly. And, I told them it was like being in Milwaukee is where I was. It was like being a Vikings fan on Lambeau Field. But I did it. And I did it because that's how I have governed, and that is how I've won my elections in a purple state. And that is going not just where it's comfortable, but where it's uncomfortable. That is reaching out to rural voters and trying to find those issues where we have common ground, knowing they're not going to agree with me on everything. There is just no other way you can govern. And when you look at the president, I'm going to Puerto Rico tonight. You look at what he did when he was in Florida. Instead of bringing people together, he goes after them, right, at that rally. And you wonder why the general manager of the Red Sox didn't show up at the White House. He's Puerto Rican. We have millions of people that are Puerto Rican in this country. And this is a simple thing. When we have disasters across this country, whether they're North Dakota floods, whether they're hurricanes off New Jersey, we come together. That's what we do. And this president has chosen not to take that route. And I'm telling you, in the end, it bugs people. They want to have someone in the White House that they are proud of. That's who I want to be.
So, Willie, we don't usually break. We have very few rules here. But one rule is we only talk about baseball teams in the Eastern time zone.
Yeah.
Specifically baseball teams
cities, really,
that are between New York and Boston.
Oh, I see. So you don't want to. You won't talk about the Twins who twice won the World Series in recent history.
Exactly.
You can't, Senator.
Know your value.
You can't step on my line.
Okay.
I think it's going to help
I
you
thought
out
because I was in studio. Go
I'm
ahead.
helping you out.
Yeah, sure.
So, Willie, we only talk about baseball teams in two cities. But if we were to break that hard, fast rule, we'd have to talk about the Minnesota Twins right now, the second best record in baseball. They are on fire, and the Senators are right. A pretty storied history there.
They are hot right now, one of the best teams in baseball. I had the pleasure, Senator, of taking my son to spring training a couple of months ago in Fort Myers to Twins spring training.
That's where they are.
What a great atmosphere down there. You drink yourself a Killabrew,
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Twins fans.
Yeah.
They get the Hall of Fame taste of Killabrew.
They're looking
great
great.
Organization, great
It's very
fans.
good. And a beautiful stadium that we love in
Yes,
Minneapolis.
it is.
So.
All
All right, Senator Amy Klobuchar, always great to see you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Come back. Good
Thanks,
luck.
Senator.
Okay.
And good luck.
You go to Puerto Rico
If the Twins
tomorrow.
can win the World Series, I will win this
There you
president.
go.
All right. Very good. good.
Up
Okay.
next.
Guaranteed.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you, Amy. The co-author of my new book, Daniela Pierre Bravo, joins us next to share her story from dreamer to TV producer to best-selling author and how she earned it. Morning Joe is coming right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.